I hope everybody's doing well. Hope you are off to a outstanding start to your week, and I hope the weekend was spectacular as well. We have a lot of boxing to talk today. If I'm being honest, I feel like on the boxing landscape, there is more bad news than good news. There's a good amount of good news, and there's a lot of interesting topics that I want to cover that are pretty exciting. But this is kind of one of those weird weeks where I feel like there are more cancellations and postponements and trash talking scenarios to report on than there are exciting future fights to report on. It's just one of those odd weeks, but we'll get to the good, the bad, and the ugly. David Colon is in the house. Thank you. And by the way, I've been meaning to respond to your. It wasn't your latest comment, but the second to latest comment. Thank you very much, because I know you had seen, I think, the live chat after the live stream. Thank you for your comments on that one. Thanks a ton. NMTK. How is it going? I hope you're doing well. I hope everyone's doing well so far this week. And I was explaining that there's a lot to get to in the boxing landscape, but I feel like there's more bad news as it stands right now to report on than there is good news. I mean, there are certain things that are obviously exciting. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn, if nothing else, is a super intriguing, interesting fight that we have on the horizon. Sebastian Fundora returns to the ring this weekend as well. And I actually, just before starting this live, I just finished doing a Fundora versus Ocampo preview. So that's going to be up like early tomorrow morning. With that fight, at first when they made the fight, I'm like, the same Carlos Ocampo that got knocked out several fights ago versus Spence Jr., that Ocampo is now at 154 and is going to be fighting Sebastian Fundora? No way, in terms of the chances of his success. But when you look a little bit closer, Ocampo's won like his last 12 fights since getting knocked out in the first round against Spence Jr. It just seems like 154 is where he needs to be. He's even beaten some, pretty decent fighters like Michel Zuski, who you might remember almost went the distance with Mean Machine Kavayaskis and then got stopped. Well, that Ocampo, Ocampo stopped Zuski, 11 others, and so he's been super busy since he lost to Spence Jr. I think that his chances against Fundora, while not great, are probably a good deal better than most think that they are. But yes, the 6'5", 154-pounder Sebastian Fundora is going to return to the ring this weekend as well. You just moved to Nevada, NMTK. I hope the move is going well. I hope it's smooth. And I hope that you've got everything where it needs to be. That could be a great experience. It could also be one heck of a hassle. So I hope it's going well. Congratulations on the move too. So this coming weekend, we've got Eubank Benn, we've got Fundora Ocampo. By the way, are you guys excited about Eubank Benn? Because I look at it as being, not the fight that we would have wanted to see either of those guys in. I think I said in the preview that there are 10 guys I would have rather have seen Eubank fight, and I could name 10 guys I'd rather see Conor Benn fight. But it's like, since they already have this scheduled and it's about to happen, let's just sit back and enjoy the show. I think Conor Benn's going to get beaten up pretty badly, and I think that it's going to go as badly for him as Chris Eubank Jr. allows it to go. I think Eubank can get the stoppage, but, as I said in the preview, I think that he's going to take his foot off the gas a little bit once he pretty much makes his statement clear, and I think that Conor Benn is going to go the distance. Here's the thing. I feel like there's not a ton that Chris Eubank Jr. could gain here, besides money. He's going to get paid really well. On the other hand, if Conor Benn beats Chris Eubank Jr., does his name just not ascend in the boxing, stratosphere, and he then not be able to totally call the shots if David essentially slays Goliath, whether he wins by decision or anything? If Conor Benn beats Chris Eubank Jr., that changes everything in terms of what the public thinks about Conor Benn. And if I had to guess, just hypothetically, if he beats Eubank, what type of an opponent would make sense next? I don't think it would be Spence or Crawford or Virgil Ortiz or Boots Ennis, I feel like Keith Thurman would be the perfect opponent, because then you could almost bill it as another like pay-per-view level super fight, just given, Keith Thurman's history, essentially, even though he's been very inactive lately. But man, could you imagine if Conor Benn is able to pull this off? On the other hand, I don't think there's a ton that Chris Eubank Jr. can really gain from this. I feel like there's so much more to lose for Eubank. Look, even if Conor Benn loses, but he loses like 8 rounds to 4, 7 rounds to 5, like a competitive decision loss, to me, that's still a win for Conor Benn. Yes, he doesn't have an O in his record anymore, but I don't think anybody would hold it against him that he lost to a guy 2 divisions bigger than him. I think that, again, if he's able to make this fight close and competitive, it still builds Conor Benn's stock. MAW's in the house as well. Thank you for coming through. Oh yeah, we're gonna get to Spence Crawford, man. But that was one of the more unfortunate pieces of news. I'm talking about Mike Coppinger's reporting as he described it to Max Kellerman. We're gonna get into that. Brandon Jackson's in the house. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. So we have those fights coming up, and I just want to gauge your guys' excitement level. Are you guys, one, excited for Eubank Benn, and are you excited about Fundora Ocampo? Also, just a quick segue. Rest in peace to Eder Jofre. His name isn't really discussed in a lot of boxing circles. You don't hear his name ring, a ton, unless you, for instance, he just passed away. He was 90-something years old. I don't have the exact age, but he was certainly up there in age. But he is the only Brazilian boxer to be in the Boxing Hall of Fame. He fought in the lighter divisions, like bantamweight to bantamweight up to like featherweight, so 118 to 126. Held titles in multiple divisions as well, and he basically fought from like the 50s to the 70s. He had one of those like it's almost hard to believe it type of records. Let me see if I can pull it up. 72 wins, 2 losses, and 4 draws is his final record. Eder Jofre, rest in peace. Again, the only Brazilian boxer to be in the Boxing Hall of Fame. That's pretty remarkable. Yeah, Brendan Jackson, it is must-see TV. Anytime Sebastian Fundora takes to the ring. And it's interesting. Again, so I'm doing a preview, dropping a preview tomorrow morning on Fundora Ocampo, but it's just interesting when you get somebody that tall, or like Paul the Punisher Williams back in the day, and Paul Williams wasn't as tall as Fundora. He looked as tall as Fundora in the ring. I don't know why that was. It was like you would see Paul Williams fight, and whether he was fighting like Winky Wright, Antonio Margarito, and then later on, Sergio Martinez, who ended up being the guy to just knock him clean out. I know Carlos Quintana outboxed Paul Williams back in the day, but Paul Williams was listed at like 6'1", 6'2", but he looked like John Bones Jones in the ring, didn't he? He looked like at least 6'4". Maybe it was because he had an outsized reach too. But yeah, Paul Williams was mixing it up from 147, 154 to 160, and he was winning pretty much every step of the way. He knocked out like Sean Bay Mitchell like early, like when he was just coming up, he being Paul Williams. But Sebastian Fundora, like Paul Williams, gives up his height a lot. It's like, if it's up to Sebastian Fundora, he doesn't want to keep you on the outside in a way that somebody who has a demonstrative reach advantage normally would. No, he likes to keep things in short punching range where he's able to throw like short uppercuts and short hooks. I mean, that fight against Erickson Lubin was a sight to behold. I have a lot of respect for Erickson Lubin. In fact, before the fight happened, I had picked Lubin to win the fight via stoppage. I thought Lubin was going to stop Fundora. I thought he was going to go to the body a ton. It's almost like the game plan went out the window once it became a battle of attrition and an all-out war. And remember, Lubin got knocked down early in that fight against Fundora. Like the second or third round, Fundora caught him with like a nice uppercut, caught him cleanly because of the way he disguised the hook. Just caught Lubin cleanly, and like from that point on, it was a war between those guys. And the fight before that, when Sebastian Fundora fought Sergio Garcia, that was a much closer fight, and Sergio Garcia went the distance. And I kind of feel like Ocampo is going to fight Fundora a lot more. I don't think he's going to take the same beating that Erickson Lubin took against Fundora. I mean, how can you take any much more of a beating than Lubin took? Like he looked like he looked disfigured by the time they stopped that fight. It was kind of scary and concerning. But I think that Ocampo has a good outside boxing game, and I almost feel like you've got to exercise some level of movement against Fundora and basically kind of keep things here on the outside with the jab, and pick your spots when you start exchanging combinations. So I think it's going to be more interesting and more competitive than the betting odds currently have it. Yeah, Lubin was a whole new person after that fight, and it was hard to see him take that sort of a beating. And it's kind of messed up for Lubin. He has suffered two of the most extreme types of knockout losses or stoppage losses. He's gotten one punch cleaned up by Jermell Charlo, right, in the first round, and then he got beaten up over the course of several rounds against Sebastian Fundora, and then was unable to continue. Well, everybody agreed, hey, you shouldn't continue. We're calling this fight off by, I think, the end of the 9th round. So, Lubin, it's like every time he starts knocking at the door to be an absolute elite, which when he was a prospect coming up, it almost seemed like it was inevitable he was going to be elite. His best win today is probably against who? Jason Rosario, maybe? And that was between the knockout losses, against Jermell Charlo and then against Sebastian Fundora. But, yeah, Fundora must see TV in a similar way that Paul the Punisher Williams was back in the day. Stan Tucker's in the house. What is going on? Thank you for coming through. Brendan Jackson, you're right. Fundora's work on the inside is super devastating. I mean, here's the thing. He's not only 6'5", fighting at 154, but he's a southpaw. So you've got to worry about the angles of fighting a lefty as well. But the way that he throws punches, like the punch that he dropped Lubin with, not later in the fight, but in the second or third round, it was a right hand lead uppercut. So it wasn't even his backhand. It wasn't a left-hand uppercut. It was his lead, and it was because he threw a feint. Lubin tightened up, and then he came with the uppercut, dropped Lubin, because Lubin basically didn't know that the punch was coming at that time. So, yeah, it's an absolute handful. And Sebastian Fundora, because he throws so many punches, it's easy to overlook sometimes, some of the craft that he has in his work. But no, he'll do some off-time stuff. He'll double up with the same hand a lot. He'll do 2 or 3 punches, take a big step, which, when he steps laterally, it's not like a subtle, when most people with a normal leg gait, when they take a step, they might move this much. But when he takes a step, all of a sudden the guy's behind you because he's 6'5". So, I can't wait to see Fundora take to the ring again. I'm getting excited just discussing it with y'all. Perdeep Singh, thank you for coming through. Shields Marshall, Mayer Bumgardner. I'm going to do another Shields Marshall, kind of like an update. I still have the initial preview up for Shields Marshall, but I'm going to do an updated one since there's some X factors here now, right? Now they had to wait a minute. Who do you think has more difficulty making weight between the two? Basically, who had to travel after, the fight was called off, recalibrate, and then start training again so then you could time the weight loss right so you could hit weight again. The same question applies to Mayer and Bumgardner, right? Who do you expect to be able to comfortably make weight and be at peak performance level with this delay? There's some things to consider there. And sometimes you could overtrain as well. If you don't cool your heels, and I just hear this, based on interviews and based on fighter feedback, when somebody is preparing in a long camp for a fight, and then it gets postponed, and they choose not to cut camp and then reinitiate camp down the line a couple weeks later or a few weeks later, and they train through that whole delay, usually there's a performance drop-off, and they say that they usually feel drained before they even walk into the ring. I hope it's not the case for any of the fighters that are going to be taken to the ring in that, Shields Marshall card and undercard. But yeah, look, I think that I still think my gut tells me Mayer is going to still, outclass Bumgarner. She's just a better technical boxer all around. I feel like she's got an athlete's chance. We talk athleticism a lot, right? I think she's got an athlete's chance. She's learning the sport quickly, but I think that when plan A and plan B don't work, usually you start to default to your instincts and, who's got the boxer instinct between the two. That's where I go with that one initially, but I will do a preview on that fight as we near the fight date. Well, it's just next weekend, next weekend. There are a lot of fights next weekend, by the way. Shields Marshall, I'm still going Shields. Look, Savannah Marshall is not fool's gold, and I'm not here to say that she is. I feel like there are more ways for Shields to win than there are for Savannah Marshall to win. And I feel like Savannah Marshall has to hurt Claressa Shields to win the fight. I don't necessarily think the opposite is true. And I'm almost, I almost don't think that Shields is going to really wobble or hurt Savannah Marshall. I do think there's a decent to good chance that at some point Marshall hurts Claressa Shields. I kind of think Claressa Shields might get either dropped or wobbled at some point of the fight, but will probably still win on the scorecards. Now, my concern there is the same concern I had when I initially did the preview, and that is because of the crowd noise and everything, the same concern I had with Haney versus Kambosos, or at the time it was Kambosos versus Haney, given the fact that you have more of a fan-friendly style in the hometown fighter than you do, Claressa Shields, I feel, has to demonstratively win a round to get the round. I feel like if it's a very close round or you're not quite sure, in my mind, I'm almost going to assume that the judges overseas are going to bank it for Savannah Marshall. Not that that's going to be the case. I just see more instances of that happening than not. So I feel like Claressa Shields needs to be